It was just another Tuesday, or so I thought. The hum of hairdryers, the easy banter between my stylists and their clients, the smell of keratin treatments and hairspray. It was the normal symphony of Serenity Salon, my little slice of entrepreneurial heaven. I was meticulously applying balayage highlights to Mrs. Henderson, a woman who'd trusted me with her hair for over a decade, when my phone vibrated on the counter. I glanced down and my blood turned to ice. It was from David, my husband. The message was short, brutal, and life-altering. I'm leaving. Brittany and I are starting fresh. Don't try to stop me. I took what's mine. Brittany. The name hit me like a physical blow. 18. Barely legal. And now, apparently, the reason my 10-year marriage was being tossed aside like yesterday's trash. Betrayal, of course, burned. But what surprised me was the almost clinical clarity that settled over me. Years of shared laughter, whispered dreams, painstakingly made sacrifices, all reduced to nothing for a tawdry fling with a girl barely old enough to drink. And then there was the "I took what's mine" part. A chill snaked down my spine. David had always been careful, calculating. What exactly had he taken? I finished Mrs. Henderson's hair, my hands moving with a precision that belied the chaos erupting inside me. I smiled. I made small talk about her upcoming trip to Italy. I cashed her out, and I acted like nothing was amiss. Years of customer service had honed my ability to compartmentalize, to plaster on a professional mask even when my world was crumbling. But as soon as she was gone, I bolted to the back room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The message replayed in my mind, each word a fresh wound. Brittany, 18. And I took what's mine. I sank into a rickety chair, staring at the cluttered desk, the overflowing filing cabinet, the half-empty coffee cup, all the mundane details of my daily life, now tainted by this gut-wrenching revelation. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. Had I been blind? Had there been signs I'd ignored? The last few months flashed before me. The late nights at the office, the unexplained expenses on our credit card statements, the sudden appearance of passwords on his phone. David had always been secretive, but it had escalated recently. 2 months ago, I'd found a dinner receipt tucked into his jacket pocket, a high-end steakhouse for 2 people. He'd told me he was working late that night. I'd felt a pang of suspicion then, but I'd pushed it aside. I'd wanted to trust him. I'd needed to. Stupid. So stupid. Instead of confronting him, I'd started preparing. It felt like a gut feeling, a survival instinct kicking in. I'd opened a separate bank account, siphoning off small amounts from our joint funds, just enough to avoid raising suspicion. I'd quietly consulted a lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Davies, who assured me that our state's divorce laws, while not perfect, tended to favor the wronged party. I'd even started meticulously documenting everything: the receipts, the late-night excuses, the inconsistencies in his stories, screenshots, printouts, everything. It was all there, ready to be used, when the time came. And now, the time had come. As the workday wound down, I stared out the window at the city streets, a blur of headlights and anonymous faces. My co-workers, bless their oblivious hearts, were chatting about weekend plans, oblivious to the earthquake that had just ripped through my life. It felt surreal, this normality surrounding me while my marriage imploded. I didn't let it show. If David thought he'd blindsided me, he was in for a very rude awakening. When the last client left, I locked the salon doors and sat down to map out my next steps. The first and most crucial was securing my finances. I transferred what little was left in our joint account into my private one. Then I logged into the shared accounts to gather evidence of his withdrawals, screenshots, printouts, everything. He might think he'd won, but I wasn't about to make it easy for him. The drive home was a blur. Our house, the one we'd spent years renovating together, pouring our blood, sweat, and tears into, felt alien, like a museum filled with ghosts of a life that no longer existed. I walked through the door, and the silence was deafening. David's belongings were gone. His absence was a tangible thing, a gaping hole in the space where his presence used to be. But instead of breaking down, I took a deep breath and got to work. The locks needed changing. I had absolutely no intention of letting him waltz back in whenever he pleased. By the time I collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion had set in, but so had a steely resolve. David had made his choice, and now I would make mine. The betrayal stung, it ached, but I wouldn't let it define me. My life wasn't over. It was just beginning. A new chapter. One I planned to write on my own terms. The morning after David's little bombshell, I woke up early, the message still echoing in my head like a broken record. Brittany, I took what's mine. Ugh. But this wasn't the time for self-pity. It was time for action. Time to cut off the oxygen supply to his little fantasy. First, I logged into our shared accounts. My fingers trembled slightly as I canceled every credit card he had in his possession. The charges flashed across the screen: a luxury hotel, a spa treatment, a ridiculously expensive bottle of champagne. Undoubtedly for his romantic getaway with Brittany. I smiled grimly as I disputed the transactions, knowing they'd soon be scrambling to cover their lavish escape. It felt good. A small but satisfying victory. Next, I called the credit card company to report the unauthorized charges. It felt empowering, taking back even a shred of control. By the end of the call, their hotel room was canceled, and their access to my financial contributions was officially cut off. David might have thought he had the upper hand, but he seriously underestimated how far I was willing to go to protect myself. With that taken care of, I turned my attention to the legal battle ahead. I'd already consulted Mrs. Davies weeks ago, suspecting this day might come, but now it was time to go on the offensive. I scheduled an urgent meeting and spent the morning gathering every piece of evidence I'd been collecting. Screenshots of David's text messages with Brittany, photos he'd carelessly left on his phone of them together, records of his suspicious transactions. Everything was neatly compiled and ready to be used against him. At Ms. Davies' office, I felt a strange mix of vulnerability and determination. The sterile environment, the legal jargon, the weight of the situation, it was all incredibly daunting. But Ms. Davies was a rock. She listened intently as I recounted the events, her expression hardening with each detail. She assured me that the evidence I'd collected would significantly strengthen my case. Filing for divorce felt like drawing a line in the sand, a declaration that I wouldn't let him ruin me any further. By midday, David's reaction came through in the form of a barrage of angry text messages. The tone shifted rapidly, from pleading to vitriol. His words dripped with desperation. He accused me of being heartless, of ruining his plans, of trying to destroy him. It was almost laughable how quickly he played the victim, as if I were the one who had betrayed our vows, who had abandoned our life together. I didn't respond. He wanted a reaction, a sign that he was getting to me, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Every message he sent became another piece of evidence, further proof of his manipulative behavior. Despite his attempts to shake me, I stayed focused. The locks on the house had been changed, my finances were secure, and the legal process was in motion. David might have blindsided me with his betrayal, but he wouldn't catch me off guard again. If he thought I'd crumble under the weight of his actions, he was in for a rude awakening. As I prepared for the days ahead, I couldn't help but feel a spark of satisfaction. David had thrown the first punch, but I'd landed the first real blow. And I wasn't done yet. The fallout from my actions spread faster than I expected. By the next morning, I received a call from Eleanor, David's mother. Eleanor had always been complicated. She'd liked me well enough, I think, but she'd always held David up on a pedestal. He could do no wrong in her eyes. Her voice was sharp, accusatory, and laced with indignation. She wasted no time blaming me for everything, claiming I had been distant, inflexible, pushing David away. Her words stung, but I kept my composure. Years of dealing with demanding clients had taught me how to diffuse tense situations. Instead of defending myself with empty platitudes, I simply read out loud. I read some of David's messages, the ones where he confessed his affair, the ones where he gloated about starting fresh with Brittany, the ones where he blamed me for his own appalling behavior. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could almost hear Eleanor's carefully constructed image of her perfect son shattering into a million pieces. She mumbled an excuse and hung up, leaving me with a bittersweet sense of vindication. Part of me felt sorry for her, but another part of me knew that she needed to hear the truth, no matter how ugly it was. As word of David's betrayal spread, my small community rallied around me. Many of my salon clients, women I had styled and bonded with over the years, came forward with words of encouragement. Some shared their own stories of heartbreak and resilience, turning the salon into a sanctuary of shared strength. One client, a regular who'd been coming to me for years, handed me a business card for a friend who specialized in family law, offering a second opinion if I wanted it. Another surprised me with an envelope of cash, insisting it was her way of helping me stay afloat. Their kindness was overwhelming, and for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a spark of genuine hope. I wasn't alone. The support wasn't just emotional. My clients began spreading the word about my salon on social media, leaving glowing reviews and urging others to support me. New faces started walking through the door, curious to see what made my business so beloved. The increased revenue was a lifeline, ensuring I could cover the mortgage and other expenses David had recklessly abandoned. Each new appointment felt like a small victory, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. Meanwhile, David's problems were piling up. With no access to our joint finances and the luxury of a high-end hotel out of reach, he and Brittany were forced to downgrade to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. The stark contrast between their grand plans and their grim reality was almost comical. Brittany, unable to resist the lure of social media, began posting sarcastic updates about their situation. Her captions were thinly veiled jabs at David's inability to provide the glamorous life she envisioned. In one particularly biting post, she uploaded a picture of their dingy motel room, complete with peeling wallpaper and a flickering light bulb captioned, "Not quite the honeymoon suite I imagined." Motel life. Broke and broken. Reality bites. The posts went viral within our small circle, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. David's carefully constructed image was unraveling, and with each snarky update Brittany shared, it became clear that their fairy tale was turning into a cautionary tale. I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. While I was busy rebuilding my life with dignity and hard work, David's choices were dragging him further into chaos. As the days passed, I found myself leaning into the support of those around me. My world, once upended, was slowly stabilizing. While David was crumbling under the weight of his actions, I was finding strength I never knew I possessed. I knew the legal battle wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was winning. The day of the court hearing arrived like a dark cloud on the horizon. I woke up with a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. I hadn't slept well, plagued by nightmares of David somehow weaseling his way out of this, of losing everything I'd worked so hard for. But I refused to let fear cripple me. I got dressed in a simple professional dress, nothing flashy, nothing revealing, and forced myself to eat a piece of toast. I needed to be strong. I needed to be focused. Mrs. Davies met me at the courthouse. She was calm and collected, a reassuring presence in the face of my mounting anxiety. She reviewed the evidence one last time, reminding me of the key points, the holes in David's story, the strength of our case. As we walked into the courtroom, my heart hammered against my ribs. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the rustling of papers and the hushed whispers of lawyers. I saw David sitting at the defendant's table. He looked different, haggard. His expensive suit looked rumpled, his hair unkempt. He caught my eye, and for a fleeting moment I saw a flicker of something that might have been regret in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by a familiar smirk, the same smug expression he wore when he thought he held all the cards. But this time he was wrong. The proceedings began with the presentation of my evidence. Miss Davies was a force to be reckoned with. She laid out the timeline of David's betrayal with ruthless efficiency, presenting the text messages, the receipts, the bank statements in a clear, concise manner. Each piece of evidence chipped away at the facade David had tried so hard to maintain. The judge, a stern-faced woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, listened intently, her expression growing increasingly grim as the case unfolded. When the conversation shifted to the financial discrepancies, the courtroom grew quieter. Mrs. Davies pointed out David's unauthorized withdrawals, his lavish spending on Brittany, the fact that he had drained our joint accounts without my knowledge or consent. The judge's stern expression said it all. She wasn't buying David's flimsy excuses. David's lawyer, a slick, arrogant man with a predatory smile, attempted to counter by claiming that David had a right to half of my salon. He argued that David had contributed to the business, that he had supported me emotionally, that his presence had somehow been integral to its success. It was laughable, really. My salon was my creation, built from years of hard work, long hours, and countless sacrifices. Every penny invested in it had come from my savings, my careful planning. David had never lifted a finger to help, unless you counted occasionally picking up takeout on his way home. Ms. Davies presented my detailed financial records, painstakingly maintained, proving beyond a doubt that David had never contributed a dime to the business. The judge's line of questioning grew increasingly pointed, and David's lawyer began to squirm. When it was David's turn to speak, his demeanor shifted. Gone was the smug confidence, replaced by a clumsy attempt at self-pity. He claimed he'd been forced to take drastic actions because he felt neglected in our marriage. He said I'd been too focused on my business, too distant, too unavailable. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. His excuses sounded hollow, especially when juxtaposed with the evidence of his extravagant spending on Brittany. He tried to paint me as a workaholic, a cold, unfeeling woman who had abandoned him. He even had the audacity to suggest that I was somehow responsible for his affair. The judge wasn't buying it. She grilled him on his infidelity, his financial misdeeds, his lack of remorse. He stammered, he stumbled, he contradicted himself. It was clear he was making it up as he went along. The climax of the hearing came when the judge delivered her ruling. Her voice was firm, authoritative, leaving no room for doubt. She ordered David to return the money he'd taken from our joint account, plus interest. She awarded me sole ownership of the house and the salon, classifying them as separate property due to my sole contributions. She denied David's claim for spousal support, citing his infidelity and his deliberate attempts to impoverish me. The relief was overwhelming. For the first time in months, I felt the crushing weight of David's betrayal begin to lift. His attempts to disrupt my life had failed spectacularly. As the ruling was finalized, David's expression hardened. He avoided my gaze, clearly seething at his defeat. I could only imagine the conversations he'd have with Brittany after this, now that their grand plans were in shambles. Meanwhile, I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high, knowing I had fought for what was rightfully mine, and won. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was a personal one. David had underestimated me, believing his actions would leave me powerless and broken. Instead, I had emerged stronger, with my dignity and independence intact. The battle wasn't without its scars, but it was worth every moment to reclaim my life. The aftermath of the court ruling was swift and unforgiving for David. His family, already skeptical after hearing the evidence I presented in court, turned their backs on him entirely. Eleanor, who had once been his staunchest supporter, refused to take his calls. The humiliation of being exposed for his betrayal and financial manipulations left him isolated, a pariah even among those closest to him. He was disowned by his parents, by his siblings, by everyone who had once believed in his carefully constructed facade of success. The ripple effect didn't stop there. Rumors about his behavior reached his workplace, prompting an internal investigation into his expense reports. It didn't take long for his employer to uncover discrepancies that led to his termination. Apparently, he'd been using company funds to pay for his little trysts with Brittany. Karma, it seemed, had a particularly sharp sense of humor. In a matter of weeks, David's life, once so carefully curated, crumbled into chaos. He lost his wife, his family, his job, and his reputation, all for a tawdry affair with an 18-year-old. As for Brittany, well, the cracks in their relationship began to show almost immediately after the court hearing. The allure of rebellion and luxury quickly faded when faced with the reality of a shared existence in a rundown motel, struggling to make ends meet. Brittany's sarcastic posts about their situation turned into bitter rants aimed squarely at David, publicly airing their grievances and only deepening the divide between them. She accused him of being a liar, a loser, and a deadbeat. She complained about the lack of money, the lack of excitement, the lack of everything. Before long, she packed up her belongings and left, leaving David alone to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. The relationship that had started with so much drama ended in silence, a monument to recklessness and bad judgment. I heard through the grapevine that she went back home to her parents. I can only imagine how thrilled they were with her choices. Meanwhile, my life was transforming in ways I hadn't imagined. The surge of support from my clients and community gave me the confidence to take my business to the next level. With the funds I'd secured in the divorce and the newfound freedom from David's shadow, I expanded my salon, opening a second location in a trendy part of town. The new boutique, designed with an elegant and modern aesthetic, quickly became a hotspot for locals. I hired more stylists, expanded my services, and started offering workshops and events. The success was overwhelming, not just financially, but emotionally. It was a tangible reminder of my resilience, my strength, and the rewards of standing up for myself. I was finally living life on my own terms, free from the shackles of a toxic marriage, free to pursue my dreams, free to be the woman I was always meant to be. As word of my story spread, it began to resonate beyond my local community. I was invited to speak at a business conference where I shared the challenges I'd faced and the strategies that had helped me navigate them. Standing on that stage, looking out at the sea of faces, I felt a deep sense of purpose. My story wasn't just about overcoming betrayal. It was about the power of preparation, persistence, and the importance of surrounding yourself with a strong support network. One moment from the conference stood out to me. A young woman approached me afterward, tears in her eyes, and told me that my story had given her the courage to leave a toxic relationship. She said she'd been feeling trapped and hopeless, but hearing my journey had inspired her to take control of her life. Her words stayed with me, a powerful reminder that our struggles can inspire others to find their own strength. Back at home, my office became a sanctuary of sorts. On my desk, I kept a framed printout of David's text message, the one where he announced he was leaving. It wasn't a trophy or a reminder of pain. It was a symbol of how far I'd come. That message, once a harbinger of despair, now served as proof of my resilience and determination. It was a reminder that I had survived, that I had thrived, and that I had built a life that was stronger and more fulfilling than anything I could have imagined with David. As the months turned into years, the final chapter of my journey unfolded. I opened a third salon, each one more successful than the last. I invested in new equipment, trained my staff in the latest techniques, and expanded my product line. Serenity Salon became a local institution, known for its quality service, its talented stylists, and its commitment to the community. I earned recognition for my contributions to the local business community, receiving awards and accolades that validated my hard work and dedication. At an awards ceremony, I was presented with a plaque for Entrepreneur of the Year. Holding it in my hands, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just about financial success. It was about reclaiming my narrative and building a life that was truly my own. It was about proving that I was more than just David's wife, that I was a capable, intelligent, and determined woman who could achieve anything she set her mind to. The culmination of my efforts came with the grand opening of a flagship salon, a sprawling space that combined beauty services with wellness offerings. It was a dream I'd had for years, now realized through hard work and perseverance. The new salon featured state-of-the-art styling stations, private treatment rooms, a yoga studio, and a juice bar. It was a haven of relaxation and rejuvenation, a place where women could come to feel beautiful inside and out. The opening event was packed with friends, family, and loyal clients, celebrating alongside me. Looking around, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for everyone who had supported me through the darkest times. My family, who had rallied around me from the beginning, were bursting with pride. My friends, who had listened to my endless rants and offered unwavering support, were beaming with joy. And my clients, who had become like family to me, were showering me with congratulations and well wishes. It was a moment of pure happiness, a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of community. David's life, from what little I heard, remained a cautionary tale. He'd moved to a smaller town, taking on odd jobs to make ends meet. He was rumored to be working as a handyman, fixing leaky faucets and mowing lawns. The sharp contrast between our lives was undeniable, but I chose not to dwell on it. My focus was on the future, on continuing to grow and inspire others to fight for their happiness. I started mentoring young women who were starting their own businesses, sharing my experiences and offering guidance. I volunteered at a local women's shelter, providing free haircuts and styling to those in need. And I became an advocate for women's rights, speaking out against domestic violence and gender inequality. In the end, my journey wasn't about David or his betrayal. It was about finding strength in adversity and using it to build something extraordinary. It was about transforming pain into purpose and using my experiences to help others. And as I stood in the middle of my new salon, surrounded by the life I had created, I knew that the best revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about thriving in the face of everything meant to break me. It was about proving that I was stronger than anything life could throw at me. And it was about building a future filled with joy, success, and unwavering self-respect. So, to David, and to anyone else who has ever tried to tear me down, thank you, because you made me who I am today, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.